If you think working the night shift is boring, you've never heard what happened to me at 3:17 a.m. in an empty building. This isn't just another ghost story. This is a first-hand account of a real event that happened during one of my overnight shifts at a 24-hour facility. I've worked plenty of nights before, but nothing prepared me for what I saw that night. As I take you through it, I want you to imagine yourself in my shoes, alone, exhausted, and surrounded by silence, until you hear something you can't explain. And by the end, you'll understand why I never worked nights again. It was late autumn, the kind of night where the air feels damp even inside. I was covering a 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift for a coworker. The building was an old municipal office, 4 floors, flickering fluorescent lights, and a heating system that groaned like it was in pain. The first few hours passed slowly. I kept myself busy by checking security monitors, sipping burnt coffee, and trying not to think about how quiet the place was. You'd think silence would be peaceful, but during night shifts, silence feels loud. It makes you notice every creak, every hum, every faint shift in the air. Around 1 a.m., I noticed something on one of the security monitors, a faint shadow moving down the east hallway on the second floor. That hallway was locked after 10 p.m. and no one had the keys but me. I thought it was a glitch. Old cameras do that. They'll pixelate or flicker. But the movement was too smooth, almost human. I leaned in, rewound the feed, and there it was again, a dark, human-shaped silhouette walking past the frame. I grabbed my flashlight and went upstairs. Every step echoed. The air was cooler on the second floor, and there was this faint smell, not bad but strange, like wet earth. I reached the east hallway and shined my flashlight down it. Nothing. The doors were closed, the lights dim. But as I turned to leave, I heard it, a single slow knock on a door halfway down the hall. That door led to an old storage room no one used anymore. The lock was rusted, the kind you need to force open. No one should have been in there. But the knock came again, louder this time. My radio crackled, and this is important. No one else was in the building. The dispatch channel was dead silent except for a faint hiss, almost like breathing. I had two choices. Go back downstairs and pretend I didn't hear it, or open that door and see what was inside. I wish I had chosen the first option. I approached the storage room, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The knocking stopped as soon as I touched the doorknob. I forced the door open. Inside, the room was freezing cold, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. My breath clouded in the beam of my flashlight. Then, from the far corner, something moved. At first, I thought it was a pile of old coats or bags, but then it straightened, slow and deliberate, until it was standing. It was tall. Too tall for a person. Thin, with long arms that nearly touched the floor. Its head tilted, almost curious. And though there were no lights inside, I swear I saw its eyes, pale, milky, and reflecting my flashlight like an animal's. I didn't move. Neither did it. The only sound was the faint hum of the old pipes. Then it stepped forward. When it moved, it wasn't like walking. It glided silently until it was just feet away from me. My flashlight flickered, and I felt the air around me drop even colder. Then it spoke. Or at least it tried to. It was a sound I can only describe as a low, vibrating moan, like wind dragging through metal pipes. My survival instinct kicked in. I turned and ran, the beam of my flashlight swinging wildly. I didn't stop until I was back in the control room, slamming the door and locking it. When I looked at the security monitors again, the storage room camera was black, offline. And the last frame it recorded before shutting off? That figure standing in the doorway, head tilted toward the camera. The rest of my shift, I stayed in that locked control room, heart racing every time the pipes groaned. When the sun finally came up and my relief arrived, I didn't even try to explain. I just handed over the keys and walked out. Later, I found out that years ago, before the building was converted into offices, that storage room had been part of the county morgue, and some bodies were never claimed. I never worked a night shift there again. If I hadn't dropped my flashlight, I never would have seen the man's face, staring at me from inside the locked freezer, even though the freezer had been empty all night. This isn't a ghost story someone told me. This happened to me alone, during an overnight shift at a roadside diner in the middle of nowhere. It was supposed to be a simple job: lock the doors, check the kitchen, and ride the night out until sunrise. But that night, something wanted me to know I wasn't alone. And when I realized what it was already too late. The diner was small. One row of red leather booths, a counter lined with silver stools, and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. It sat alone off Route 91, surrounded by endless black fields. The nearest gas station had been abandoned a decade ago, a rusted shell across the road, windows shattered, weeds growing up through the concrete. Night shifts there were usually uneventful. My shift started at midnight. By then, the last customers were gone, the lights dimmed to a soft yellow glow, and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerators in the back. The air inside always carried a mix of coffee, grease, and bleach. It clung to your clothes like the diner didn't want you to forget it. I do my first round, check the bathrooms, the storage closet, the back door lock, then settle into my office, which was just the farthest booth in the corner. From there, I could see the entrance and most of the dining area. My thermos of coffee sat at my side, my flashlight on the table, my radio clipped to my belt. The freezer was the only thing I didn't like. It was a huge old walk-in with a heavy steel door and a latch that clunked like a vault. Every so often, its compressor would kick in with this low groan that almost sounded alive. I used to joke about it, until that night. It was around 2:13 a.m. when I first heard it. A faint tap 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 from the kitchen. Not the random pop of pipes or the click of cooling metal. No, this was deliberate, light, repetitive, like fingertips on wood. At first, I thought it might be a mouse. I'd seen them before, darting across the tile when the place was quiet. I grabbed my flashlight and pushed through the swinging kitchen doors. The kitchen smelled faintly of onions and fryer oil. Stainless steel counters reflected my flashlight beam in dull, warped shapes. Everything was in its place, except the freezer door was standing wide open. Now that shouldn't have been possible. The latch was stiff. You had to pull it hard to open it, and I always made sure it was shut on my first round. I stepped closer. The air pouring out was sharp and icy, biting at my cheeks. I clicked my light inside. Frost glittered on empty shelves. The only sound was that low groaning hum. I pulled the door shut, turned the latch until it clunked, and told myself it was nothing. Just old equipment. But when I sat back in my booth, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A single greasy fingerprint on the inside of the window beside me. The inside. That's when it hit me. If someone had gotten in, they were still here. I did another sweep, slower this time. My boots echoed on the linoleum. Every creak of the floor, every distant pop of settling wood sounded too close. I checked under the counters, behind the dry goods shelves, the bathrooms, nothing. And then I saw it. At the far end of the hallway near the employee lockers, the light above was flickering, buzzing, dimming, then flaring bright again. Beneath it was a trail. Not blood, but a faint line of water drops, spaced out like something had been carried, dripping. I followed them, my heart pounding. The trail led back to the freezer. This time the door was shut again. I reached for the latch. From the other side, 3 slow knocks. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My breath clouded in the cold air leaking through the seam of the door. Then the knocks came again, louder. I backed away, nearly tripping over the mop bucket. I grabbed my radio and called the sheriff's non-emergency line. My voice shook as I told the dispatcher there was someone in the freezer. She told me a unit would be there in about 15 minutes. 15 minutes. In this silence, it felt like forever. Trying to keep myself busy, I went back to the front counter. There, under a stack of old order pads, I found an employee logbook from years ago. Pages filled with notes about inventory, schedules, and in the margin of one yellowed page from 1998, a line scrawled in shaky handwriting. If you hear knocking from the freezer, don't open it. That's when I heard my flashlight roll off the counter and hit the floor. It clattered, spun, and came to rest with its beam shining under the freezer door. And that's when I saw them. Fingers. Pale, unmoving, curled slightly around the inside edge of the door. The sound of a car pulling up outside snapped me out of it. I bolted to the front, unlocked the door, and waved down the sheriff's deputy. My words tumbled out. Someone was trapped in the freezer. He walked in, calm as if I'd called him about a loose dog. His boots thudded softly on the tile as he made his way to the kitchen. These old places, he said, resting his hand on the latch. You hear all kinds of stories. He pulled it open. Empty. Frost undisturbed. No fingers. The deputy gave me a look that said he thought I'd been imagining things. He told me to get some rest and headed for the door. But as he reached it, he paused. He put his hand against the glass to push it open. And when he pulled it away, there was a fresh, greasy fingerprint. I quit the diner the next morning. I never went back. I don't know if what I saw was a person, a hallucination, or something else entirely. But I do know this: places collect things. Memories, echoes, sometimes people. And if you're working the night shift alone and you hear something on the other side of a closed door, maybe you're not meant to open it. If you think that's terrifying, wait until you hear what happened to the janitor on his last shift. Click here before it disappears.